The fight between Madrid and Barcelona heats up. The latest battlegrounds are a German court and the streets of Barcelona after the figurehead of Catalan separatists was detained in Germany. We ask if his future is as a prisoner or a president. I'm Adnan Nawaz, and today's newsmaker is Carles Puigdemont. He's a hero to millions of Catalans. The Spanish state regards him as a traitor. The former president of Catalonia, Carles Puigdemont, was detained in Germany on Sunday after Spain reissued a European arrest warrant. He's being held in prison while a German court decides if he should be extradited home. Madrid wants him back to face charges of sedition, rebellion and abuse of public funds, all linked to October's referendum and Puigdemont's declaration of independence. His arrest in Germany has reignited anger in Catalonia, where tens of thousands of people have been on the streets to protest. So whose definition of democracy will prevail, Puigdemont's or the Spanish state's? Natalie Pahonen reports.
Catalonia has been here before, with pro-independence supporters rallying against rulings from Madrid. But this time they're calling for freedom for their politicians. 25 separatist leaders are facing charges of rebellion, embezzlement or disobeying the state for their role in the region's independence referendum last year. That includes the former Catalan president, Carles Puigdemont. He and 4 others in self-imposed exile were the subject of a European arrest warrant reissued by Spain. Puigdemont was arrested in northern Germany. He'll call the Neumünster remand prison home while a regional court decides whether to extradite him to Spain. He can only be extradited if the crimes he's accused of are also punishable by German criminal law. Supporters say he's a political prisoner, and if he's sent back, he won't receive a fair trial. The Spanish government says it's simply following the rule of law. But it's once again exposed the deep division between Madrid and Barcelona.
Vamos a ver, yo estoy dispuesto a negociar y hablar, lo he estado siempre dispuesto, sea quien sea, al que elija el Parlamento de Cataluña, siempre y cuando la ley permita que esa persona sea elegida.
For the Prime Minister, finding someone to work with is fast becoming a distant prospect. After Madrid brought Barcelona under its direct rule for declaring independence after holding the banned referendum, new parliamentary elections were called in Catalonia. Pro-independence politicians won a slim majority, but the parliament hasn't been able to elect a president. Puigdemont was forced to withdraw. Another pro-independence nominee, Jordi Sanchez, is being held in detention. And the next in line, Jordi Turull, has also been detained after last week's court ruling from Madrid. If Catalonia doesn't have a new leader by May, then the Catalans will head back to the polls once again. The regional opposition says that's unnecessary.
We are here to defend all the people like us who think this process has been a great failure, which has caused a lot of damage, social, economic, institutional, and political. We don't need to extend this process.
But pro-secessionists argue the will of the voters needs to be respected.
This situation asks for a political solution, not a judicial one. Now is the time for politics. We have always defended that, and now it is more important than ever.
So will this latest legal manoeuvring from Madrid break up the political capital of the pro-independence movement? Natalie Pahonen, The Newsmakers.
Joining me now from Barcelona is Carlos Silva. He's a senior member of the UPyD party, which opposes Catalan independence. Also in Barcelona is Elizabeth Castro, a political analyst and author who supports the region breaking away from Spain. And from Cardiff in the UK, Andrew Dowling is with us. He's a historian and author of The Rise of Catalan Independence, Spain's territorial crisis. Thank you to all three of you for joining us on the Newsmakers. Carlos, how important is this judgment from the German court going to be in terms of the current crisis?
What the German has to decide now is to decide if there is a similar and equivalent punishable crime under the German law, and so I think that that's going to be a fast, quick, and easy thing to do, because we're talking about European arrest warrant. So I think that despite the fact that there is no crime of rebellion in German law, there is a crime of high treason, which is for those who use force or the threat of force to undermine the constitutional order. So that's equivalent to what Carles Puigdemont has been accused of. So I think that in a couple of months' time, we'll have him sent back to Spain to be judged.
Liz, do you agree with that Carles Puigdemont, when he was president of the Catalan parliament, threatened violence? Because that is something that Carlos is very correct about. The German court, if Carles Puigdemont were to be found guilty of the similar crime that he's accused of in Spain by the German court, that issue of the threat of the use of violence and use of violence would have to be proven.
Well, and it would be very difficult to prove, since no Catalan politician or political leader has asked for any violence to be committed at all. In fact, Judge Llarena had said that in one of his decrees, that we know that the defendant hasn't committed any violence. We know that they haven't asked anybody else to commit violence. But since they want independence and they know that the Spanish state will respond with violence, we're going to blame them for the Spanish state's violence. That's not rebellion. It's not rebellion if the Spanish state uses violence against a democratic people trying to be able to choose its political future by voting with ballot boxes. That's not violence. That's not rebellion. It's certainly not high treason in Germany.
So, Carlos, if it's not rebellion, treason, sedition, what about the misuse of public funds? There are some independent legal analysts who say that could be the one issue where the German court finds that there is a similarity between Germany and Spain. But is it your understanding, if Carles Puigdemont were to be extradited on the charge of misuse of public funds, that would be the only charge that he could actually stand trial in Spain for? And if that's the case, would that be acceptable to the Madrid government? Because it's a much, much more minor charge than the others.
Well, there is an important detail, because I haven't mentioned violence in any moment. I'm talking about force or the threat of force, which is not exactly the same as violence. And that is what German law says. And I think that it's evident that Carles Puigdemont and all his government has to use force and the threat of force by undermining and recurrently disobedience, their recurrent disobedience of law in Spain, in trying to undermine the constitutional order, and that using the power in the churches, right, that belong to the churches, to force Spain's constitutional frame. So I think that's an important detail. Also, that we're not talking about an extradition request, but an arrest warrant, which is also a guarantee that things are going to happen in an easy and quick way. I think that the German courts won't have any doubt about it. And I think that the judge, after all he's done, all the the members of the Catalan government have done during all this process, to judge them by the misuse of public funds will be really unacceptable for the Spanish government.
Andrew, you've written that the detention of Puigdemont, Jordi Turull and other secessionist leaders, and then here's the quote, brings the extraordinary and tumultuous events of Spain and Catalonia since September 2017 closer to an end point. How exactly closer to an end point? Because it just seems to be another marker in a long struggle.
Yeah, well, when I say that, what I mean is it brings to an end point the nature of the conflict as it's happened really between 2012 and 2017, which is a very optimistic, very positive and very peaceful, actually, independence movement that was also incredibly naive. It believed that it would have international support. It had zero international support. It completely underestimated the strength, the capacity of the Spanish state to respond. So what we're seeing, we're seeing the end of a cycle of Catalan independence and the start of a new cycle of Catalan independence, which is starting now. It's a much more, it's a movement that's split internally between, if you want, radicals and pragmatists, between those who think we now have to build a greater social majority. And when I talk about a greater social majority, we should note that the electoral support for Catalan independence in any election since 2012 has never gone above 48%. So it was incredibly naive of the independence forces, in my view, to try to break with Spain when they never even had plus 50% of the vote. And again, that was confirmed in December 2017 in the most recent election. So the only way, Catalan independence is absolutely not an end. The reasons that have produced the turn to independence, the legitimate grievances and perhaps illegitimate grievances, are still there. They haven't been addressed. So the movement will continue, but if you want the incredibly naive movement that existed between 2012 and 2017 has gone.
Liz, that's not a bad point, is it? Because there hasn't been any international support for Catalan independence, and the secessionist parties are split amongst themselves. That's weakened the whole Puigdemont-inspired movement, hasn't it?
It's not a Puigdemont-inspired movement. It's a movement that's inspired by the people. And you can call them naive or you can call them Democrats. They believed that mobilizing, educating themselves, electing a majority in the Catalan parliament, insisting on a referendum to peacefully, as Andrew said, peacefully determine their own future, and that their voice would be heard. Is that naive or is that democracy? Do we really believe that the only way to change things, to change political borders, is through war and through force? I don't believe so. That makes me naive. Then I accept that assessment. The fact is, and then the question about whether or not we're divided, we're actually quite diverse. That's a strength. That's not a weakness. The Catalan independence movement draws strength from the right to the left. With lots of different parties. Yes, sometimes they disagree, but they all agree that Catalans deserve the right to choose their own future by voting, that there has been no force used or threatened, no force, no violence, Mr. Carlos, and that this is what needs to be taken into account. Have we had international support? Well, in fact, Puigdemont has traveled to Finland. He's traveled to Denmark. He's traveled to a number of other countries before being forced into exile. And it would, once we declare independence, that is when we will have or not have international support. Right now,
he declared independence.
Yes,
he
it's
declared
true.
independence. He did it in October, Liz.
Well,
sorry, Andrew, come in on that. Go on, Andrew, and then Carlos after Andrew.
Yeah,
Andrew
the official
first.
Catalan Republic was... Yeah, the Republic was proclaimed on the 27th of October 2017. 5 months later, not one country in the world has recognised the Catalan Republic. There are only 2 places in the world that have never had any recognition on that scale. One of them is South Ossetia, which attempted to secede from Russia in the 1990s. The second one is Catalonia. It's unprecedented to have 0 international recognition. It doesn't matter if you get a parliamentarian in Scotland, a parliamentarian in the European Parliament, or a member of the Green Party. What defines whether you're recognised internationally is international recognition. And it has been an absolute failure of the Catalan independence movement to achieve any independent recognition. They have 0. They have none.
Okay,
so
Carlos?
The new Catalan movement that has to be built from now on has to find a new approach.
Catalonia didn't have any recognition is because it decided not to press against the Spanish government. The idea was to invite negotiation, to invite dialogue, and not to create a violent conflict. That was Catalonia's decision to back off of the Declaration of Independence to avoid the violence that Spain was threatening and that it had shown on October 1st by beating, innocent voters, peaceful voters. So, that's a question that's going to have to be taken into account. And this is where the whole world doesn't understand why Spain refuses to listen to any of Catalonia's grievances, even though such a sizable proportion of the population is saying, we are not satisfied with the current situation, you need to talk to us. And Spain keeps saying, no, 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 and in fact, we're gonna jail all of your political leaders in jail in unheated Madrid prison cells. It's ridiculous. That's not a 21st century democracy.
Liz, you say the whole world doesn't understand the approach that the Madrid government is taking. The EU is 100% behind Mariano Rajoy's handling of this situation. There are various reasons for that, but this is...
The presidents of the EU, perhaps, but the people not so much.
Yes, OK, that's a different matter.
It's a club of member states.
OK, Carlos, you've wanted to come in for a few minutes.
Well, it is clear... Yes, OK, well, it's clear that they haven't achieved any international support. The bid for independence has clearly failed. So now they must go through a painful process of acknowledging this. They must come to terms with reality, especially a whole society which has been intoxicated by this nationalist propaganda for decades. So now they're trying to say that it's all about democracy and the fight for democracy, but it's not true. It's not true. Democracy cannot be the imposing or the imposition of the will of less than half of the population to the other half, despite what they think. It's not it's something that it's an overwhelming support of Catalan citizens to that option. So in any case, there's been a recent statement of the Deputy President of the European Commission who said that you can be against the law, you can discuss the law, you can modify the law, but you can't break the law. So we're talking about the rule of law, which is the pillar, the foundation of all democracies. So democracy is that. Democracy is not fighting for privilege, is not fighting for immunity. One is always liable of being held responsible for the facts. And that's what's going to happen to Puigdemont and all the people that have taken part in this plot, this rebellion against the institutional order in Spain.
Carlos, when you're talking about being ruled by a minority of the population... Liz, sorry, please. Liz, I'll give you a chance in a second.
Sorry, I can't
Carlos, when you're talking about being ruled by a minority, are you talking about the number of people that voted in the referendum in Catalonia in October?
No, I'm talking about the latest legal elections in Catalonia, where the pro-independence parties got less than half of a
Yeah, they may have done, but they've
right?
they've got 70 out of 135 seats. So if those secessionist parties can work together and go for the one thing that they all agree upon, and they can agree upon independence, then that's the majority. 70 out of 135 seats in the Catalan parliament is a majority.
It's a very slim majority.
Yeah, OK, fine. But you look at Brexit, OK? That deal's been going on in the UK as well. Listen, come on, 70 out of 135, we can both do very simple maths. Okay. Carlos, where's the compromise going to come from?
That was a referendum. That was a referendum. We're talking about the support of the voters in a real election. Right? We're not talking about a fake referendum where only the pro-independence people voted. So we're talking about a real
In fact, it was a referendum that was called by a majority of the Catalan parliament. Not a fake referendum, an actual referendum called by a majority of the Catalan parliament.
The referendum, no, that's not true. It's absolutely false.
History.
The referendum was, the referendum was called
Spain
by
has refused to allow Catalonia to have a referendum like the UK allowed Scotland. They were able to solve it in a democratic way as opposed to this autocratic way.
If you're both going to talk at the same time, no one's going to hear anything.
The process was absolutely unlawful.
OK, Andrew, two people talking over each other doesn't work in terms of cognition of the argument.
Sorry, I didn't catch that with Liz speaking.
OK. As an outsider, Andrew, where would you see a potential compromise? I can completely understand, and I'm sure everybody can, that the passions that have been inflamed within Spain might make compromise difficult. If you were to come to the country as an outsider and as an advisor, what could you possibly say to the two parties that would be some sort of compromise? Because at the moment, there's none.
No, there's no compromise, and actually a strong part of the reason there's no compromise is actually the position of the Madrid government. And I think Liz is absolutely right that no concessions of any kind have been offered to the Catalans the past 5 years. The leaders of independence have never been able to go back to their people and say, look, Madrid is offering us, it's not independence, but at least it's a start, or we can build on this, or we can, go in a certain direction. Unfortunately, the policy of the Madrid government, which is, still being practiced today, is to the use of legal mechanisms to to solve a political problem. Now, the Catalan question is a political problem, and you need to, even if I say 48% is not enough to break with Spain, you do have to recognise the grievances of many Catalans. And the Catalans want to have the protection of their language, culture and identity. They want to have greater say over how their taxes are collected. They want greater infrastructure spending on their economy. They've got a whole range of, if you want, political, economic and cultural grievances that can actually be, very easily resolved if there's the will. This isn't the Middle East. It isn't a situation of terrible violence, but it requires the willingness of parties in Madrid and in Barcelona to sit down at a negotiating table and hash out these issues. Unfortunately, that still hasn't happened.
Liz, would Catalan secessionists be prepared for some sort of compromise, shall we say, rather than full independence immediately, some sort of deal like the Basque region has with more physical autonomy and other sort of compromises granted by the central government? Would that be okay, or is it independence or bust?
No, that's a really interesting question. And if that question had been asked 10 or 15 years ago, then it might have been able to be solved in the way that Andrew says. What's really remarkable about this situation is exactly the fact that Spain has made no effort whatsoever to even listen to any of those grievances. It has no idea what is going on in Catalonia, and so it's lost a huge amount of credibility. In fact, there was a fair bit of negotiations over a new Statute of Autonomy between 2000 and 2006 that tried to address some of those issues. Unfortunately, the current president, Mariano Rajoy, brought that Statute of Autonomy to the Constitutional Court and had it stripped of many of the important things that Catalans had been able to negotiate, which weren't even very important differences in what they had, the relationship that they had before. So if you can forge this new agreement, but then the Partido Popular is going to take it to the court and take out all of the bits that you were able to negotiate, you lose all your credibility. The other problem is that even if Rajoy should suddenly tomorrow, have a revelation and say, wow, maybe we should really listen to the Catalans and see what's going on with them, his party would burn him alive. There is no way that he can go back and say, oh, actually, we were wrong about taking 16 billion euros off the top of Catalonia's finances, because where's that money going to come from? They've gotten used to using Catalonia's resources in the way that it does, and it's an incredibly corrupt party. There's hundreds and hundreds of people under investigation.
That's a separate issue.
So,
separate issue.
There's not a way of getting out of that.
Corruption.
Okay, no, let's not talk about corruption.
Right? If you
let's talk about Catalonia.
We can talk about corruption in Catalonia.
Carlos, let's not talk about that. Okay, I asked Liz not to. So, Carlos, the last word to you, please. Is there going to be a compromise? Is there anywhere that the Partido Popular, Mariano Rajoy's party, leading a minority government mind and having to deal with the Basque party as well, PVN, whose support he needs, what's he going to do about the Catalan issue?
Well, I would like to remind the audience that the Catalonian government has the highest self-government in all Europe, together with the Basque country. So the possibility of a compromise to give more competencies to the regional government is almost impossible, but because that would mean the reassignment of the national government, because there is no other regional government in all Europe that has its culture, its language recognized as much as the Catalan has. That's a fake debate. So there is a very slim range for an agreement, because it's not a political issue, right? So it's something that's been built up during decades just to create this false narrative, and so that I think that it's now a legal issue, and the pro-independence parties must accept that they've lost the game.
We have run out of time. Really appreciate your presence on the Newsmakers. Thank you. Still ahead on the Newsmakers, we look at allegations that Malta is a mafia state as the case surrounding a murdered journalist takes a new twist. And we look back at the American woman at the center of the landmark civil rights lawsuit Brown versus Board of Education. Linda Brown was a Kansas schoolgirl who helped shape U.S. history. Be careful what you post on Facebook. That's a lesson the leader of the UK's opposition Labour Party has been learning the hard way. Jeremy Corbyn found himself in hot water this week over a post from 2012 that's reignited a debate about anti-Semitism in his party. Corbyn has apologised for the post, which related to a controversial mural. He's also acknowledged his party does have a problem and needs to do more to address it. He's been a staunch critic of Israel throughout his career and a strong supporter of the Palestinian cause. But Jewish groups say both Corbyn and the party have crossed a line and that action is needed rather than empty words. Shoaib Hassan has more.
He's not a man known to mince his words, nor to back down after making controversial comments. But the leader of the UK's Labour Party, Jeremy Corbyn, may have gone too far in an old Facebook post that's just come to light. A message of support 5.5 years ago for the artist of this mural that was later removed for being viewed as anti-Semitic. A Labour MP demanded that he explain himself.
Good morning. Good morning. Good morning.
Corbyn has now apologised, but it's not the first time that senior Labour leaders have been accused of anti-Semitism. Former London Mayor Ken Livingstone was recently suspended from the party after remarks connecting Zionism to Adolf Hitler. It's something Corbyn has said is not acceptable in the Labour Party.
Our Jewish friends are no more responsible for the actions of Israel or the Netanyahu government than our Muslim friends are for those various self-styled Islamic states or organisations.
But enraged Jewish community leaders in the UK say the trend is strengthening rather than declining, and more needs to be done. Pressure is now mounting on Corbyn as members of the Jewish community and their supporters in the Labour Party hold protests, like this one outside Parliament on Monday. It was against what they call Jeremy Corbyn's systematic failure to understand and deal with anti-Semitism. Those who defend Corbyn say the issue has been blown out of proportion, and that anyone can get labelled an anti-Semite for criticising Israel's treatment of Palestinians. So, will Corbyn be able to clear away the growing accusations of anti-Semitism, or will the issue leave deep divides within the UK's opposition? Shoaib Hassan, The Newsmakers.
Joining me now from Newcastle in Northern England is Dipu Ahad. He's a member of the Labour Party. And in London, we have Jonathan Arkush, President of the Board of Deputies of British Jews. Gentlemen, thank you for your time. Jonathan Arkush, does Jeremy Corbyn dislike Jews?
Well, he certainly has a blindness, I fear, towards racist anti-Semitism, because in the past he's always sided with the anti-Semites and he's not taken the concerns of the British Jewish community seriously. We've had a lot of words from him, but what we're looking for and what we now really must see are effective actions.
Dipu, an open letter from a group, different groups that represent the Jewish community have said enough is enough, that Jeremy Corbyn, all his actions have just been empty, and that actually there's something more serious going on and he hasn't been able to address that. When will he do that?
Look, what we have to look at first and foremost that anti-Semitism is an issue not just in the Labour Party. I don't think it's a huge issue in the Labour Party. I think it is being made out to be bigger than it is. But let me be quite clear here. Anti-Semitism is a problem throughout society, in Europe, particularly in this country. We need to stamp it out. Jeremy Corbyn, as you know, has been fighting against racism, xenophobia, anti-Semitism, Islamophobia throughout his life, not just his career. And we have to acknowledge that. Saying that he kind of is someone is perpetrating anti-Semitism is totally wrong and disrespectful to the man who's been standing up against all sorts of hates throughout his life and throughout his career. Let's make it quite clear here, there's local elections coming around the country in the next few months, and talking about making this issue now, talking about this issue now, doesn't help the Labour Party at all. And I think, it needs to stop. I think these people, particularly from the Labour Party, trying to smear Jeremy Corbyn, need to stop now. And there are other Jewish groups as well within who are supporters of Jeremy Corbyn who have come out. There's two main Jewish organisations come out supporting Jeremy Corbyn and saying he's not anti-Semitic. So I know you mentioned that, there are organisations who come out condemning Jeremy Corbyn. There are also organisations who are condemning people who are claiming that Jeremy Corbyn is somehow anti-Semitic or making the issue about anti-Semitism quite big in the UK.
Jonathan, you're shaking your head.
It's exactly that sort of issue from the councillor which exemplifies the problem. A councillor, let me say to you, we're not opponents, we're on the same side, because we want to make the Labour Party a home for all places and all minorities. We're not inventing this. Look, yesterday, no less than 50 of your own party's MPs came to the gathering in Westminster Square, and many more were sympathetic and were inside the House of Commons on parliamentary business. Jeremy Corbyn wrote to me yesterday 2 letters in which he accepted that anti-Semitism was a major issue for the Labour Party. So denying it, I'm afraid, is just not going to cut any more ice. To suggest that this is some sort of manufactured... Hold on, councillor. To suggest that this is some sort of manufactured issue for the local elections is ridiculous. We've been banging on about this for more than 2 years. And the final thing I want to say in answer to your remarks, and I repeat, councillor, we're on the same side, not opponents, if you want Labour to be a better place, is that the group you mentioned, a straggly little group of complete outsiders in the Jewish community, complete outsiders. They have no part in the community except to criticise it. Yesterday in Parliament Square, there were 2,000 demonstrators who came at 24 hours' notice. There were about 24 of the other sort. So I really think you can see where the balance of Jewish community opinion lies.
Go on, Deepu.
Look, there's an issue with anti-Semitism. As I said, throughout society, we need to, as councillors, as people from the local authority or in this country, we need to deal with anti-Semitism head-on. We cannot deny that. Look, the Labour Party is made up of individuals. Individuals will have views. Unfortunately, there will be anti-Semitic views, there will be racist views, there will be sexist views, there will be homophobic views within the party, which we need to stamp out. And one thing Jeremy Corbyn has done, which we have to acknowledge, is that report by Shami Chakrabarti. We have to look at that report and acknowledge that a report has been done from the recommendation from Jeremy Corbyn, and we have to look at that and need to stamp it out. I am not saying for once there isn't an issue with regards to anti-Semitism, but making it a huge issue, saying that it's pandemic, it's massive within the Labour Party, is plainly wrong. I've been into politics for many years. I've been a Labour Party member for over 15 years, and I've not once seen issues with anti-Semitism. Now, I'm not saying there isn't issues. There are issues. And people who have made anti-Semitic remarks within the Labour Party have not only been suspended, there have been people who've been expelled from the party. So Jeremy Corbyn is doing his bit. Does he need to do more? Of course. Does the leadership need to do more? Of course. Does the Labour Party in general, do councillors, does MP need to do more? Of course. But making him sound as though that he is somebody who is perpetrating the whole issue about anti-Semitism, he's the one leading on the anti-Semitic issues against the Jewish community in this country, is plainly wrong. So you mentioned some of those MPs who went and protested in Parliament outside. Rightfully so. If I was there, I would have protested against anyone who hates any sort of communities, particularly the Jewish community. But, you have to look at some of those MPs who come out now with their daggers out to stab Jeremy Corbyn. These were the same people who tried to oust Jeremy Corbyn with no confidence vote just a few years back. So I'm not going to take any lessons from them. Is there an issue with anti-Semitism? Of course there is. Is there an issue with anti-Semitism throughout society? Of course there is. But it's not just a Labour Party. as I said, Shami Chakrabarti has come out with a report. We need to look at the recommendations in that report and we need to deal with anti-Semitism. It's our duty to do so, to stand in solidarity with our Jewish brothers and sisters and stand up for them and speak up for them. But let's not make this issue about Jeremy Corbyn, because Jeremy Corbyn is not anti-Semitic. He's done what he can do. Yes, he needs to do more, and we need to take the recommendation from the Shami Chakrabarti report and make sure that anti-Semitism is stamped out from society, from the Labour Party, once and for all.
OK. Jonathan, Dipu says that as far as he's concerned, the Labour Party is prepared to stand with the Jewish community. In that report of Shami Chakrabarti, she said that while Labour was not overrun by anti-Semitism or other forms of racism, there is an occasionally toxic atmosphere and that there was too much clear evidence of ignorant attitudes. Is this an issue for Jeremy Corbyn specifically, or is it an issue more for the Labour Party? That one story about a 2012 post on Facebook, has that been blown out of proportion? Because the story being that he didn't believe that he saw the anti-Semitism in that mural and therefore said it shouldn't be taken down. And then when he was attacked for having that position, he said, oh no, I made a mistake. Absolutely, it was anti-Semitic. It should be taken down. Is that just an excuse to attack Jeremy Corbyn? Is there something in that story, that one story?
No, let me answer all those various points. First of all, Chakrabarti's report was 2 years ago and its recommendations have not been implemented. So to say now, as your councillor does, that we must look at it, the question we're asking is why has it taken 2 years to look at the Labour Party's own report? The next point to say is that this is not an isolated incident about the mural. The mural actually is rather serious. You only need to look at that for a second to see that, as Jeremy Corbyn now acknowledges, it contained grotesquely anti-Semitic caricatures. He says, I didn't look at it properly. He's also been a member of no less than 3 Facebook groups in which anti-Semitic material, Holocaust denial and all sorts of racist abuse is posted on a regular basis. Jeremy Corbyn says, oh, I never read it. You know, all these things strain one's credulity. And let me say something else. Senior Labour shadow cabinet ministers like Sir Keir Starmer and Emily Thornberry have written saying, we have a problem here. I'm assuming that they're not included in the MPs of Councillor Dipu's own party, who he says have their knives out for the leader.
OK, Dipu, we've only got a couple of minutes left. I've got a list here of Labour members, not MPs, who have been found to be engaged in anti-Semitic activity online and elsewhere. But the example of Naz Shah, a member of Parliament for the Labour Party, who before she became a member of Parliament posted on social media stories that people said were anti-Semitic. And then she admitted that it was anti-Semitic. She's still a member of the Labour Party. She's still a member of Parliament. Jeremy Corbyn must do something about this. You are a minority yourself. When a minority tells you that they are feeling racist abuse and racist attitudes towards them, that's not a political point. It's a social and cultural point, isn't it?
Look, as I said before, and let's make it clear, anti-Semitic crime.
I understand. You're going to say the same thing you said before, that the Labour Party wants to reform something. But why not? Let's concentrate on the head of the Labour Party and say, call him. You call him to action right now.
Look, at the end, you know, there are people, we have to understand there are issues with regards to anti-Semitism, and it's throughout society, not just the Labour Party. And we need to do as much as possible to stamp this hatred against this minority community once for all. Let's make this clear. But as a Labour Party member who's been a Labour Party councillor for many years, and I'm not here as a councillor, I'm here as a Labour Party member, if there are issues within the Labour Party, let's take recommendations from the Shami Chakrabarti's report. Yes, this has come up again with regards to the mural, and I think it's an opportunity now to look at the recommendations and make sure we stamp it out once for all. We don't want our new generations of people who come into the Labour Party to, be part of a party who's got a stigma attached that is anti-Semitic. Look, there are issues with anti-Semitism. We need to stamp it out. We need to look at the report. Every single councillor, anyone who's part of society needs to look at the report, take heed with that report, and make sure we stamp it out once for all. I'm not saying there isn't a huge issue with regards to anti-Semitism, but it is made out to be bigger than it is. And, just a few weeks ago, Corbyn was a Russian spy or Czech spy. So what we're saying is, there is a campaign against Jeremy Corbyn, if it's one thing or not another, all the time. But as I said, if there's issues with regards to anti-Semitism, we need to stamp it out. Let's look at the recommendation which was done by Shami Chakrabarti, and let's make sure we stamp this hatred out once and for all, not only from the Labour Party, but from society in general.
OK, Dipu, I suppose Jonathan would say 2 years after the report, but we have to leave it there.
Hang on a minute.
Dipu,
hang on a
Jonathan,
minute. I need to say this because this is...
Go on then, but be brief, please.
Yeah, I just want to say this. I just really am so saddened by the councillor saying it's a campaign against the Labour Party. That is yet again another way of saying the victims are to be blamed. That's exactly the sort of language, exactly the sort of culture that has to be stopped.
Nobody's blaming the victims.
You're not taking the Jewish community's concerns seriously.
OK. Jonathan, you've made your point. Dipu, we understand the position.
Seriously, Dipu.
No, OK, that's fine. We have to leave it there. Thank you very much, both of you, for joining us on the Newsmakers. A Russian woman with links to the murdered Maltese journalist Daphne Caruana Galizia turned herself into police in Greece last week. She says she fears for her life. A former employee of Pilatus Bank in Malta, Maria Efimova, was one of Caruana Galizia's main sources in an investigation that alleged corruption at the highest level of Maltese politics, including Prime Minister Joseph Muscat. Daphne Caruana Galizia was killed in a car bomb in October. The investigation into who ordered the killing is still ongoing. After the murder, Efimova fled to Greece, but she's been the subject of 2 arrest warrants from the Maltese authorities. She's still in Greece, fighting to avoid extradition. The Greek MEP Stelios Kologlou supports Efimova's claim to secure residency in Greece and insists it would be dangerous to send her back to Malta. He says the arrest warrant against Maria Efimova is based on ridiculous accusations by Malta's authorities. Her possible extradition would seriously jeopardise her life. Greek justice must take into serious consideration the murder of Daphne Caruana Galizia, to whom Maria Efimova had revealed a lot of information concerning financial scandals. Let's try to make sense of all the twists and turns. Let's speak to Manuel Delia. He was the press secretary of the former Prime Minister of Malta. He's now a blogger on Maltese politics and was mentored by Daphne Caruana Galizia during the last few months of her life. Manuel, thank you very much for your time. Can you just remind us of the main findings of Daphne's investigations which included looking into the Panama Papers?
Daphne discovered stories about all the politicians involved in corruption in Malta, at least the ones we know of. Her biggest story was that at Pilatus Bank, which you mentioned in your introduction, there was evidence, physical evidence, that the Prime Minister's wife held a secret Panama company. We knew from the Panama Papers and revelations before that Daphne Caruana Galizia had published that the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff had a secret Panama company and the Minister for Energy had a secret Panama company. She also revealed how they went around the world trying to set up bank accounts. She reported that they finally managed in Dubai, in spite of the fact that they were politically exposed persons, earning a salary of a few tens of thousands of euros a year, but promising their bank that they would be depositing at least $1 million a year. These revelations broke out about 2 years ago now. Panama Papers broke out over a year ago. And yet, none of these persons being mentioned have been properly investigated by the authorities. Impunity has gone on, and in the meantime, the journalist that discovered these stories is dead.
And what about the investigation into her death? At what stage is that?
There has been successful arrests of people who are believed to have been involved in the actual physical execution of the crime. So the people who put the bomb and turned on the detonator and ultimately killed her. Those people currently are in jail. Evidence against them is being heard, and eventually they will be tried. And the evidence against them is compelling. However, there's been no word whatsoever on who put them up and who paid for this assassination. These are people the people who are under arrest are people whom Daphne Caruana Galizia did not know. She never wrote about. They had no reason to kill her. And from what has been discovered in these investigations, have before been involved in other bombings. So they are hired hands, professional bombers. The real question is who put them up to it. And those investigations, there's no news coming out of the police. Incidentally, that is also a matter of controversy. It is something that the relatives, the family, the sons of Daphne Caruana Galizia have had to go to court about, because leading the investigations is a politically exposed person, the Assistant Commissioner of Police, whose wife is a minister in Joseph Muscat's government. And there clearly is an indication that there isn't much enthusiasm to try to find out who wanted Daphne dead.
Manuel, you've said it yourself, there's a lot of money involved here, and the bank's Iranian director, Ali Sadr Hashemi Nejad, he's been indicted in Manhattan. The allegations against him are that he evaded American sanctions against Iran by funneling around $115 million of Iranian money through business dealings in Venezuela and Malta. In an environment like that, it becomes very difficult to know who to trust. Who is this politician you're talking about that is themselves under scrutiny? Who appointed that politician?
Well, the Prime Minister has, in Malta, essentially secured control of all the institutions. The Chief of Police that we have, the Commissioner of Police, who in Malta can be hired and fired by the Prime Minister at will, is the 5th Commissioner of Police in 4 years. When you have that sort of rotation, when you have that sort of movement, it is clear that the Prime Minister himself physically has control and personally has control of the people who potentially should be investigating him and people close to him. Even if he is not involved, and I'm not saying that he is, in the killing of Daphne Caruana Galizia, certainly people close to the government, people within government, have to be on the suspect list and should be investigated. You speak of Ali Sadr, who is in a jail indicted for multiple counts of bank fraud and money laundering. Daphne Caruana Galizia had been writing about Ali Sadr and about Pilatus Bank for 2 years, and no one went to knock on the door and actually investigate what was happening at Pilatus Bank. Certainly, no action has been taken that we know of until the Americans moved in and took the action they needed to take. Daphne Caruana Galizia wrote about this. She wrote about the sale of Maltese citizenship, passports, to oligarchs. And now we are finding that the services provided in the sale of passports are related to the services provided by Pilatus Bank. And the third link in this, clearly, is the amenability of the Maltese government to be flexible for the potential clients of these services. So basically what they do is they find a foothold within the European Union to get citizenship of the European Union, to get banking facilities through which to pass money into or out of the European Union. This has been something that Daphne Caruana Galizia has been reporting for quite some time, and it might explain why she's no longer with us.
Maria Efimova is fighting this extradition. She doesn't want to go to Malta. She worked for that bank. As we've said, she was one of the main sources for Daphne's investigations. What do you think will happen to Maria Efimova, a Russian citizen, if she goes back to Malta?
Look, for a European Union member state to refuse a request for extradition from another European Union member state is virtually unheard of. The European Union is designed for cooperation, And when a country asks for a person to be sent over, another country usually sends them over. As you mentioned in your introduction, there are very specific circumstances to this case. There is the danger to Maria Efimova's life. I think it's reasonable to say that she's in danger when you see what happened to Daphne Caruana Galizia just 6 months ago, less than 6 months ago. There's also the fact that the Maltese authorities are chasing Maria Efimova on an international arrest warrant over an alleged misappropriation of less than 2,000 euros. This allegation was made by Ali Sadr, who's now in New York in a jail facing 125 years in prison for his financial crimes. When you see things, you have to weigh on one side the need for EU member states to cooperate on justice, and on the other side, the need to protect sources. If you do not protect sources, you cannot have journalists. And if you cannot have journalism, independent journalism, you cannot have democracy. And these are the considerations that the Greek government and the Greek authorities must be making right now.
Manuel Dalia, thank you very much indeed for your time. Thank you for joining us on the Newsmakers. That's all for this edition of The Newsmakers with me, Adnan Nawaz. Do check out more of our stories on YouTube, Facebook and Twitter. Remember to like, follow and subscribe. Next time, Egyptians have been heading to the polls, but with an election so one-sided, we ask whether voting makes any difference. Until then, thanks for watching. Goodbye.